this morning. I still have no Oreos. But that's okay, because even as far as the message goes, we're taking a quick hiatus, a quick diet from Oreos, so to speak. Last week, I talked about how in the messages to the different churches in Revelation, oftentimes Jesus follows this pattern of, here's something good about you, here's what I don't like and would like to see improved, and here is something else that's good about you. And I also mentioned that there are a couple of churches where this is not the case, where Jesus pretty much only has positive things to say. And today we are going to be looking at one of those messages, which hopefully will be an encouragement, assuming that we don't get too upset by what Jesus has to say to the church as far as what they're going to deal with. I wanted to start with a story/question. Have you guys ever had to sacrifice or kind of work for something that you thought would be worth it in the end? I know for me, really the clearest story that I have of what it feels like to kind of sacrifice for something that I thought would be worth it was a story of me when I was working in the summer after my sophomore year of high school. Now, this is going to make me sound like a really lazy person, which, kind of true, but not the point. So, this is my sophomore year, right after my sophomore year of high school. My experience with work is not extravagant by any means. I had chores here and there, mow the lawn, take out the trash, things of that nature. But this summer was a little different for me. I was really into playing paintball, which I still am, and for the record, we should do that as a church sometime. Just some good old classic fellowship of shooting each other with balls of paint that only hurts temporarily.
Clay would be walking around with paint.
Really, that's all I want. I just want Clay out there. Because I'm incredibly experienced, and I have a feeling that this would go very well for me. So Clay, we can just go on our own. That's fine. The rest of you don't have to come if you don't want to. But me and Clay, we'll go out back and we'll have some fun.
I'm worried about it. You can't even hit a turkey.
Exactly. With a shotgun. But anyway, so I was really into paintball, and I was wanting to save up some money, which is very difficult to do on a relatively low allowance for the week. And so I wanted to earn some money, right? And so what do? Well, you work. Or you steal. But the moral thing is to work. And so I was going to work and try to earn some money in order to buy some paintball equipment so that I could be really interested and really start getting going with my future as a professional paintball player, which obviously didn't happen. So this was a very different little change in my life, right? Because to me, it was a sacrifice, because when all of my friends were waking up at 10:30, 11 o'clock, noon, not me. I was up at pretty much 7 o'clock most mornings because I'm a city boy, and when it comes to getting ready, it takes me a while. 20 to 30 minute showers. I'm not proud of it, but it's just true. And so I would have to wake up pretty early, especially compared to the rest of my friends. I would have to tell my friends that we can't hang out today because I'm working. And I was working for my mom. My mom was running a preschool at the time. She was kind of the director of this Christian preschool that was affiliated with our church. And this was unlike any job I've ever had in my life. And it was I mean, compared to some of the work you guys have probably done, it was pretty much nothing. But compared to the work that I had done, which was like at most mowing the lawn, this was a stretch. Me and my cousin had been hired by my mom, which is always a bad sign. Me and my cousin, we were known for shenanigans as children, and so we spent a lot of time watching funny videos and stuff, which it makes more sense when you realize what the work we were doing was. We were in charge of stripping the wax on the floors, the tile floors, and then re-waxing it. So I don't know if you've ever been in that sort of a scenario where you're having to do that. There's these things in, stripping formulas called chemicals. And there's also these chemicals in the wax. And so when you're just in these enclosed areas, you start to get messed up, kind of mentally. And so we would sit there and we would just watch these videos and just die laughing at these completely random, pointless videos. And I remember working, and it was so difficult. I could never do the stripping right because you got this giant buffer machine, and it's the thing was taller than me at the time. I'm not super tall now, and I was even shorter back then, and so it's I couldn't control it. It would and of course you're stripping wax, and so your shoes are just kind of sliding all over the place, and you're just constantly moving around. And so my cousin would do that, and I would kind of come behind and do the wax and stuff like that. And I was working as a way to save and earn money for some paintball equipment. Super anticlimactic into the story is my mom said, no, you can't spend money on paintball equipment. And so to show her a thing or two, I bought a $175 pair of sunglasses.
Wow.
Not the wisest purchase I've ever made in my life. Not the dumbest, but not the wisest. And so, to me, the thing is, and the main point is that the work and the sacrifice was worth the money and the reward at the end. No, I didn't get my paintball equipment, and that was kind of a letdown, but I did get a pair of Oakleys, which, nobody cared about when I was in high school. I thought it would make me cool. It didn't make me cool, but not the point. I worked in order to get a reward. And the same thing happens today. I'm sure most of you probably have some kind of job, have some kind of work that you do in order to kind of earn a reward to pretty much survive, honestly, because that's what happens when you're an adult. When you're a kid, you work, you buy what you want. When you're an adult, you work, you buy what you need. I've come to learn that, and that's kind of difficult. And it's not as fun as buying paintball equipment and sunglasses. But, oh well. Today, as we open to Revelation chapter 2, we're going to see a church that Jesus pretty much congratulates and says that they've done good work, but lets them know that difficulty is coming. We're going to see that Jesus promises them difficulty that they will face, but he's also going to promise a reward if they continue to struggle through. So if you have your Bibles or some kind of app, some kind of device, feel free to read along with me. I think it'll be on the screen. It'll be on the screen. This is what Jesus says. Write to the angel of the church in Smyrna. Thus says the first and the last, the one who was dead and came to life. I know your affliction and your poverty, but you are rich. I know the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Don't be afraid of what you are about to suffer. Look, the devil is about to throw some of you into prison to test you, and you will experience affliction for 10 days. Be faithful to the point of death, and I will give you the crown of life. Let anyone who has ears to hear Listen to what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who conquers will never be harmed by the second death. So, there's a lot of historical context to Smyrna that's kind of important for truly understanding what Jesus is saying here. For starters, Smyrna was a city that was well known for being a port, which basically means they were well known for their trade. A lot of trade, a lot of business would take place in Smyrna, and oftentimes the economy there was doing pretty well. Right, and that's important because what Jesus writes here is that I know that you are in poverty. So I was doing some research, and basically what one of the suggestions was that I find some viability to was that these Christians were often being discriminated against for their faith in who Christ was. So, as many people were wealthy, as many people thrived in this community, those who proclaimed faith were often discriminated against, and therefore were often stricken with poverty. And so Jesus says to them, I understand that you're poor, I understand your affliction, I understand the discrimination that's going on against you, but I tell you that you're rich. Not monetarily, but spiritually. Because even though you suffer due to lack of wealth, you maintain a high level of faith in me, and because of that, you have spiritual wealth. Jesus talks about the slander that they face from those who claim to be Jews but are not, but are of a synagogue of Satan. And just to kind of clarify, what Jesus is saying here is that it's not like every Jew in this city is like part of the synagogue of Satan. It's meant to be a description given to people who were antagonistic towards the church. Right, as if you read on through the book of Revelation, you see that when it comes to the church, when it comes to God's chosen people, ultimately the enemy is Satan. And this is first revealed here in chapter 2. And by first revealed, I mean in the book of Revelation. Obviously, Jesus talks about how Satan is the enemy and things like that. But in the book of Revelation, we see that this is the first account where Satan is identified as the true enemy of the Christians. And so, the point that Jesus is making here is that those who are against you, it is because of the work of Satan and them. But he tells them to press on. And then the super encouraging words of Jesus, do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. So, you are going to suffer, but don't be afraid. There is going to be more affliction. You are going to be tossed into prison. You are going to be attacked because of your faith in me. Right? Not because you're a criminal. Not because you deserve to be put in prison. Not because you're a murderer or a thief. But because you're a Christian. You're going to be persecuted. You're going to be put in prison. And it's important to understand prison in this context. Nowadays, we think of prison, and that's where you go when you're being punished for a crime. Right? Like, typically that's why people go to prison. That was not the case in Roman times. Prison was not used as a way of punishing people. It was meant to be a holding place for the real judgment and the real punishment. Right? So whether that be exile, whether that be execution, regardless of what that judgment was going to be and that decision would be, prison was not a place where you go to just kind of fulfill a sentence and then, you serve your time and you're out. It was not a corrections facility. It was not a place to make you a better person. Prisons in this day and age, they were terrible places to be. Like if you think of prison now and you think that that's not so great, imagine going to prison where they don't feed you, they don't clothe you, nothing's taken care of for you, and the only way that you actually survive is if people on the outside want to take care of you. Right? You don't have a government that says this is cruel and inhumane, and so we'll feed them, we'll take care of them, we'll make sure that they survive, we'll get them counseling, get them help, get them plugged in with wherever we need to. That didn't exist. You starved, you went hungry, you were cold. Now, I know that if some of you have been to prison, the food is not super well known, and it's not really good food now, but at least it exists. And Jesus is saying, this is what you are going to face. This is not about if you will, this is what's going to happen. And so, to clarify, this is why Jesus says, be faithful to the point of death, and I will give you the crown of life. Because they were not meant to serve their time in prison, because of the fact that prison was just simply a holding for most likely an inevitable death, Jesus is trying to encourage them and strengthen them. Oftentimes, being a Christian and being put in prison and ultimately being judged and condemned, oftentimes it led to death. Because some of the slandering that Jesus talks about earlier, the slandering happens in ways that the Romans took very personally. So, the Romans had an emperor, and you were supposed to pretty much worship the emperor and really only praise the emperor. So when people are being slandered as Christians, the way that that's going on is that they're saying, well, these Christians, they believe that Jesus is going to overthrow the emperor. They believe that Jesus is the Lord and not Caesar. And that tends to be a problem. Because of Jesus' teaching on communion, and because people kind of misconstrue what Jesus' teaching was when he talks about how the body is, or the bread is his body and the blood is the wine, because of them misconstruing that, the Romans often interpreted that as cannibalism. That these Christians were literally eating a person's body and literally drinking a person's blood. And because of this, that was a crime, and so, even nowadays, eating people tends to be frowned upon. And so in the Roman Empire, it was something that was punishable by death. And so all of these misconceptions about what these Christians believe would oftentimes lead to their death, and Jesus tries to strengthen them and encourage them and tell them that if you are faithful to the point that you die, I'll give you the crown of life. So, if you die for my sake, you will live. And Jesus goes on to say, let anyone who has ears hear. The one who conquers will never be harmed by the second death. As troubles come to you, as persecution comes your way, as you get locked up, as they want to behead you, as they want to crucify you, as they want to remove your life and your existence from this earth, that will be the first death. But the sting and the power of the second death will never harm you. And that same message is given to us today. If we're being honest, we have it pretty good here in the States, especially compared to what I just described in the Roman times. But there are places around the world where it's not so great to be a Christian. There are places where persecution happens even to the point of death. And the promise that Jesus gives to Christians today is the same as it was at the church of Smyrna. Now, I don't want to convey this in a negative way. There is still persecution that happens to Christians here in the States. Oftentimes there is discrimination that happens, and odds are we probably won't be killed anytime soon for our faith. But that doesn't mean that we aren't going to have struggles because of who we believe in. And Jesus' promise is still true even to us in a context where we tend to have it better than most. That if we be faithful to the point of death, whether that's death of natural causes, whether that is execution, which, I mean, hopefully not, but it could happen. If we remain faithful, we will be granted the crown of life. It's a promise that was made then, and it's a promise that stands today. And so, as we depart from here, I want this to be one of the messages that is meant to be encouraging with very little condemnation. The Christians at Smyrna were doing it right in Jesus' eyes, and we can follow in their footsteps. In following weeks, we'll learn some more things about what we shouldn't do, because Jesus tends to have a problem with it. But today we get to really learn about what we should do. That as we go through our lives, we see sacrifices that need to be made for the kingdom of God. And that as we live our lives and we make those sacrifices, ultimately we are given a just reward because of the sacrifice that Jesus made on the cross. So because of his sacrifice, we're rewarded. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for this day that you've given us. God, I'm thankful for the sacrifice that your Son made so long ago. God, I pray that as we depart from here, that we would look for sacrifices that we need to make in our lives. God, whether it's something that we need to give up, whether it be a behavior or a habit or a way of living, God, if we need to give it up for you, that we would make that sacrifice. God, we live in this world. It tends to get bad. We live in a very broken world, and there's a lot of broken people. God, oftentimes we feel persecuted and bad things happen to us for our faith. God, I pray that we would just continue to stay strong. God, that we would persevere, and that we would work to receive the crown of life. And it's in your Son's name that I pray.